Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Another Timeline, Another Life, our retrospective review series on David Warner as the Unbound Doctor. Today we are looking at Doctor Who Unbound, Masters of War, released in December of 2008, written by Eddie Robson, directed by Jason Haig-Ellery. Masters of War stars David Warner as the Doctor and Nicholas Courtney as Alastair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. As always, because I do these unscripted, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place in case I do decide to talk about spoilers. If you do not wish to be spoiled, in the description box below is the link to Big Finish's website where you can purchase Doctor Who Unbound, Masters of War. The CD has since been discontinued, so it is only available to purchase as a digital download or as part of a digital bundle containing the original 8 Unbound stories. Masters of War was the finale of the original Unbound series. If you were to read the plot synopsis either on Big Finish's website or on the back of the CD case, you would see that every Unbound story lists its what if premise, except for two, Full Fathom 5 and this story. To the best of my knowledge, I did do some scant research on it. It seems that the premise of Masters of War is, what if the Brigadier had traveled with the Doctor? Because there are some aspects of the fandom who do consider the Brigadier a companion. Even though he never officially traveled in the TARDIS, one of the prerequisites for being considered a companion. Like, the closest we got was the 5 Doctors and I think Modron Undead. But no, he never really traveled in the TARDIS. And some people do still consider him a companion. Also, for an example of that not always being the be-all, end-all of what is considered a companion, Liz Shaw never traveled in the TARDIS, and she's considered a companion. Anyway, that's beside the point. So this story opens... the premise of this story is that the Brigadier is actually traveling in the TARDIS. And the way we open this story, the Brigadier and the Doctor have been traveling for some time. In fact, after escaping their most recent adventure, they try to travel somewhere else, only because the instruments need to be recalibrated, so the Doctor says, they end up landing on Skaro. David Warner's second story is a Daleks story. We're going to talk about the Daleks a little bit here, because Masters of War has some interesting ideas. It's a decent story, but not all of its ideas land with me, and we're going to talk about why. But I suppose that is a good place as any to start. I don't entirely know how I feel about the Daleks in this story, because a lot of what's being said here is kind of muddled, if anything is being said at all. I have said in the past, I don't know if I've said it in one of my videos, but I have said it before, the Daleks work best as a fascist allegory. I believe they were originally created specifically to be a Nazi allegory, but, since their initial conception, it has been expanded to be general fascism. And I find that the best Dalek stories really lean into that angle. For example, 2 of my favorites are actually audios. The Dalek Occupation of Winter, and with the First Doctor, and The Elite with the Fifth Doctor. This story does some interesting ideas, again with the Daleks as a fascist allegory, but because of how the Daleks do end up being utilized by the end of the story, I feel like a lot of that theming kinda gets muddled a little bit. So when the Doctor and Alastair arrive on Skaro, the Thals have been subjected to Dalek occupation. And it took a few listens of this story to pick up what was going on, because if you'll recall from Sympathy for the Devil, David Warner's incarnation of the Doctor is an alternate universe take on the Third Doctor. So, going from what would have been the Third Doctor's initial appearance, Spearhead from Space, the Third Doctor's Dalek stories never happened for him, And more importantly, outside of his I'm going to rewind and approach that again. For the Doctor has had run-ins with the Daleks in his first two incarnations, the Daleks, the Dalek invasion of Earth, the Chase, the Daleks master plan, the power of the Daleks, and the evil of the Daleks. Everything after that, from the Doctor's perspective, has not happened. For the Brigadier, I believe Day of the Daleks has happened, and I think one more. I'm trying to remember if there was a Dalek story in season 11, because Planet of the Daleks is kind of irrelevant to this scenario, but that's all getting beside the point. The big thing here, of course, is that Genesis of the Daleks never happened. So the fourth Doctor in this universe never interfered in the Daleks' creation, presumably meaning that the Daleks had a very different outcome ultimately. And it gets brought up a little bit here, Davros, because spoilers, even though it's on the cover, Davros is in this story. Davros mentions that when he made the Daleks, as bastions of purity, as like the ultimate life form, they ultimately took his ideals to heart, so to speak, and eliminated him as well, seeing him as beneath them. So the Daleks he had to, when those initial batch of Daleks betrayed him, not quite to the degree that they did in Genesis of the Daleks, Davros had to instill pity and mercy in the Daleks to make them more obedient to him. And then he disappeared. So let's talk about this a little bit more. As I said, there are some interesting ideas here with the Daleks. Before Davros shows up, he only shows up in the second half of this story. The Doctor manages to capture a Dalek and override its programming to believe that it is Davros and that it has made the final transformation into a full-blooded Dalek and it is coming back to resume control. But the Daleks in charge, particularly the Black Dalek, refuse to believe this. Of course, we as the audience know it's a lie. We saw the Doctor overwrite the Daleks' programming. But that is one of those interesting ideas with the Daleks as a fascist allegory coming into play. When confronted by their progenitor, fascists do not relinquish power. They want to keep it. They want to stay in power. So they would rather destroy their creator, their idol, their hero, than surrender. But like I said, a lot of this gets muddled because of how the second half of the story plays out. That forces the Daleks and the Thals to ultimately end up working together. Before I get to that, let's talk about performances. David Warner, obviously, this is a 2-hour story, so unlike Sympathy for the Devil, which was only an hour, David Warner is getting much more time to grow into his version of the Doctor and put much more of his own mannerisms and his own spin on the role. For example, we get that little bit of twinkle, that mischievous twinkle that the Doctor has. Like, there's one standout scene where the Doctor is talking to one of the Thals, and he says, "We should be over by Christmas," to which the Thal, of course, responds, "What's Christmas?" And the Doctor, and you can hear the whimsy and the mischief in Warner's voice. "Ah, let me tell you about Christmas." So we get some more of those playful aspects of the Doctor, and we also get a little bit more of this Doctor in general. There's sort of this world weariness to him. Like, he talks a lot about many of the wars he's fought in, and just how much it weighs on him and how much it drags him down. Like, he says at one point, "I try to stop wars before they happen, and this is why." And it shows how tired he is, which is going to be interesting given what's coming next in this series. But also there's this aspect of haste, so to speak, written into the Doctor that kind of makes it feel like Robson didn't know how far into this Doctor's future he was writing, because, Alastair mentions to one of the Thals that it seems like the Doctor's always rushing from adventure to adventure to adventure, like he's trying to make up for lost time, which I feel like in part was kind of the initial starting point of the Fourth Doctor era. You know, the Third Doctor had been exiled to Earth, and he had been essentially grounded for so long that he couldn't wait to explore. And while he started to in the Third Doctor era, when he finally regenerated into the Fourth Doctor, that was his opportunity. That was his time to begin all that exploring. But like I said, with the way this story opens, we know the Doctor and Alastair have been traveling for some time. So, you know, it's kind of just clashing ideas here, you know, like how many adventures down the line is this for the Doctor and Alastair? How long have they been traveling together? You know, how long has it been for the Doctor? Is this like their second or third adventure together, or is it like their 10th? Is what I'm getting at. This whole idea of the Doctor is doing all these adventures and doing so much traveling to make up for lost time, what I mean. But, like I said, it all goes to Warner further developing his own version of the Doctor. And I think this story is such a strong installment for that, because he really gets to dig into the role in a way he really didn't in Sympathy for the Devil. Like I said, in Sympathy for the Devil, a lot of that performance was mostly Warner and his acting abilities and his charisma. Here, it feels like Warner has a much better working relationship with the material. Nicholas Courtney is also good. A lot of this story is battles between the Daleks, or battles between our other foe, which I am building up to, admittedly. And it's showing how great a team the Doctor and Alastair make, because they work so differently, you know. Alastair likes to be in the thick of it. He likes to throw himself headfirst into battle. And, you know, given his backstory in this universe of being a disgraced soldier, he feels like he is getting to do something right this time. I do also like the way this story ends, because this story is also a companion exit story. After the threat has been dealt with, Alastair realizes the alliance between the Thals and the Daleks are not going to last, so he parts ways with the Doctor, deciding to stay on Skaro to help keep the alliance going. And it's a short, sort of chaste moment, but it is played really well, and I think the subtlety of it is what really delivers the emotion. But let's get to the big thing I've been kind of talking around and building up to. Being that the Daleks in this universe aren't entirely responsible for their creation. It's subtly so. When the Daleks return, first let's talk about the format, so you can kind of get what I mean when I say, oh, let's talk about the back half of the story and stuff. Masters of War is a 2-part story, with both parts being over an hour long. I essentially call this the season 22 format. So during the days of the main range, Doctor Who was done still serialized the way Classic Who was. They were usually done as 4-parters for roughly 25-minute episodes, you know, like the serials of the classic show. But, you know, over the course of the classic show, there was something that happened. During the Peter Davison era, the 5th Doctor era, because of a scheduling conflict with a sporting event, Peter Davison's story, Resurrection of the Daleks, had to be edited to air as 2 roughly 45-minute episodes rather than 4 roughly 25-minute episodes. And keep in mind, this was in Davison's final season. This decision was seen as such a success, such a ratings boom, that the following year, Colin Baker's first season, season 22, all serials would be done that way. They would be done in 45-minute episodes, then 25-minute episodes. So every so often, again, while the monthly range would do roughly 25-minute serials with some wiggle room, occasionally you would get a season 22 formatted story with longer episodes, you know, with longer 2-part episodes. And that's what Masters of War is. It is a season 22 story in format. And the format really lends itself here because the stories are 2 different parts. Part 1 is the Doctor and Alastair liberating the Thals from Dalek control, only for part 2 being the Doctor and Alastair leading the Dalek Thal alliance against their new opponent. Now, let's go on. This video is full of tangents. I apologize for that. So, when the Daleks were first leaving Skaro and exploring the universe, they came across an alien race known as the Quatch. The Quatch are sort of interdimensional conquerors who conquer a planet and consume its resources, leaving it barren. The Quatch, many years before this story takes place, many centuries as a matter of fact, saw the threat the Khaleds and the Thals posed to them and decided to intervene, subtly manipulating the Khaled-Thal war, ultimately up to the creation of the Daleks. And also the Quatch were responsible for the disfigurement of Davros and, of course, the creation of the Daleks. In fact, this is one of the things I was kind of building up to. The Quatch have a scientific advisor of their own called the Chief Technician, and it is Davros. I don't know how I feel about the Quatch. I suppose as a one-off alternate universe story, it's fine, but it's just part of the tragedy of the Daleks, and Davros in particular, is that it's a destruction of their own making. At every opportunity, they could have stopped what was coming. They could have stopped this creation from happening, but they didn't. They chose to go forward. They chose to continue with it. And that decision is ultimately what leads to their destruction. So to have an alien race going, we were pulling the strings the whole time, it kind of ruins the effect of that tragedy. For me, at any rate. Like I said, I am conflicted on the idea of the Quatch because, like I said, for a one-off, it does kind of work. But again, just for the history and everything the Daleks are, I feel like it kind of cheapens things. I will say, though, Terry Malloy is really good here. I don't think I've talked about Davros before, but of the 4 we've had, Julian Bleach in New Who, Michael Wisher in Genesis of the Daleks, David Gooderson in Destiny of the Daleks, and Terry Malloy in the 80s and on Big Finish. Terry Malloy is my favorite, if for no other reason than he has just gotten to do more with the role than any of the other Davroses. And this alternate universe version of Davros is very interesting because he sees the Daleks as a failure, Like, he talks about his original intended goal for them, the Daleks as we know them, with their ideas of supremacy and, again, the fascist allegory, but that they never committed to it, that they're protecting the Thals, and just how he sees it as a failure. Also, just how he's subtly been manipulated by the Quatch all these years. Malloy gets to do something very different with Davros than he normally gets to do, and he does it really well. I do also love his final confrontation with the Doctor. It's a very brief scene, but it is a really good one. Do I have much more to say? No. Masters of War is a great story. It is actually a step up from Sympathy for the Devil, the more that I think about it, just because Sympathy for the Devil really just has some aspects that haven't aged entirely well, and probably didn't hold up well to begin with, if we're being honest. And I do think, and while Masters of War doesn't entirely commit to the ideas it's setting up, and I don't think some of them, like the Quatch, play out all that well, it is a really good story that, once again, is bolstered by very strong performances, in particular this time around, David Warner and Terry Malloy. But those are just my thoughts. I feel like this video was much more rambly and incoherent than I normally am. But have you heard Masters of War? What are your thoughts? Start a conversation in the comments below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. Share the video around, all of it helps my channel grow, and in the description box below, you'll find the link to my socials where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. Next time, things are going to change drastically, both in format, because we're pivoting to box sets, and in story, because the Unbound Doctor is meeting a main universe companion. So next time we will be looking at The New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 3, The Unbound Universe. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.